good. Can we hear it? Can we hear it? Yeah, I hear it. Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out here tonight, Thursday. EthVan at DCTRL. For those of you tuning in, thanks for showing up. We've got tomorrow night for another event. There's the off-chain event that is happening over at AndCo. So that's the off-chain Vancouver group. They're putting on a tomorrow night. It's at 6 o'clock, I think. And AndCo, it's by Cole Harbor. So like Georgia Street and Cardero. Go to that intersection. Look for this really nice white building that has funky balconies on it, and it's in there. So that's AndCo. I think 6 to 9 type thing. So if you're looking for some mingling, you can do that. And then there's a UBC event as well on Tuesday. We just got this Google sheet showing up. So just checking some of the chats. It's been posted there. So no, I don't think so. I don't think anybody can show up. They're going to give us food. They're going to give us food. So if you want food, now if you're broke and poor, you've been losing it all on meme coins, you can go get a little bite to eat Tuesday night. And it should be more than just like, ramen, Wheater water soup. Maybe you'll have beans in the Wheater water soup. Wouldn't that be nice? All right. Other than that, if you haven't already, join the Discord. I think everybody here is in there, so that's good. You in there? You in the Discord? Perfect. Okay. Anything else? Any other announcements, mentions, this, that? Shani's going to paint the door, right? We're going to do some artwork around here. That's cool. Thank you. Anything else? We're good. Alrighty. With no further ado, we will have Yoni here tell us about hating the game and grasping the mechanism. Let's do it.
Good. Check. Good. Not popping, because I have a tendency to spit. All right, we're good.
Oh, and please, if you have questions, raise your hand. We'll get you a mic, or take a mic that's just chilling out here. And there is a PO app tonight, so make sure you mint your PO app. Voila. Give her.
Okay, so I'm interested in mechanism design, and I realized I didn't actually know too much theory. Where did it come from? What is it trying to do? So I went back and studied it, and it's something of a meme where people in blockchain, where people mention it, and they might make a nice little payoff matrix or something, and you're like, okay, that seems reasonable, but then it doesn't conform to the expectations. Behavior is more complex. It's like, what's going on? Does it actually apply to the systems that we're interested in, that we interact with? And what good is it really? Okay, so that's what this talk is trying to do. Hating the game, not the player, and trying to get our handle on what mechanisms are at play, whether financial or otherwise. That's my attempt at Byzantine Wojaks, because of the Byzantine generals problem. Anyone? Yes. Okay. We're good. Okay, so the outline is we're going to talk about origins of game theory, some basics, because very jargon heavy. They'll take a commonplace word like dominant and then have a technical definition for it. So we kind of need those to reason about it. Then we're going through the concepts, types of games, strategies, and then maybe where they apply to blockchains, or maybe not, and other kind of game worlds, because I'm still interested in these autonomous worlds, maybe even metaverse, the M word. And then how do we even test those models? Because if they're very complex, they kind of break out of this matrix, and there's too many combinations. Okay, so origins. Well, wars, as bad as they are, tend to accelerate or create new fields in technology. So out of World War II, we got cybernetics, game theory, cryptography, tons of other things. Those just didn't exist before, and they were maybe created out of necessity, or we funded the right people. We finally put them in think tanks, and they came up with these techniques and theories. Then the Cold War, and hostilities, were a bit more subtle. They developed them further. So the important people here are von Neumann and Morgenstern, who first published Theory of Games and Economic Behavior in 1944. So pretty much near near the the end of the war, but they're still fighting, right? Now they weren't military minds. They were poker players. Actually, they were like poker playing nerds, economists, and mathematicians. So that should tell you something to begin with. Then John Nash comes along and develops it further. I don't know if probably everyone has seen A Beautiful Mind, which is a dramatization film about his life and his contributions to the game theory. And then there was the Rand Corporation, which during the Cold War got a lot of funding as again a think tank, and out of that group came Prisoner's Dilemma, and some refinements to it. And it's unfortunate that it took a while to affect like actual disarmament, because again Cold War was all about threat of nuclear war, and it was a an arms race and a build-up with a lot of close calls until we entered into a situation where we could reduce stockpiles, and still relevant today. So basically a game is just a model for strategically interdependent behavior. So what I do affects you and vice versa. We just find ourselves in some situation and I'm pursuing my interest, and in doing so I affect you because you're pursuing yours, or whatever you value, whatever your preferences are, and we'll see how that shakes out. So we can talk about properties of the games. How many players do they have? So finite means that there's a given a bounded number of players. Has to be more than one usually, unless it's playing against the system or the house itself. And then infinite, where anyone can join. It's kind of unbounded. It's not infinite in practice because it's not infinite as many entities, but it gets to some large number. How many rounds do we have? Is it like one time, or do we just keep iterating, right? And we have some sense of history. And then entities need to remember, like, what did they do last round? What did their opponent do last round? So they need some kind of, sense of what happened. Are the moves simultaneous, where they, you have to commit at the same time? Or are they sequential, where like a board game, when it's my turn, I make the move, and then it rotates. We can talk about the payoffs, which is the rewards of these games. If they add up to 0, as in if I win, you lose, which I think everyone is kind of familiar with, that zero sum.
Zero sum game.
Yeah, you played them. You're playing them all the time. Or positive sum, in that like we can both win. Like I'm not, you're not losing out. So we can describe the payoffs that way. And then we can describe strategies as symmetric, meaning all the players have access to the same group of strategies, the same pool of them, or asymmetric, where, I don't know, you have outside information, you have some kind of edge, you have a strategy that you can employ that others can't. So it's uneven, or maybe there's different, roles within the game. Now, when we say it's a game, it's really a model. We're not saying that, besides like a board game or something bounded, something that's humans designed, sometimes the situation is more complex, but the game and a simple game can describe it or get close. It can give us a model to reason with. So we can sort them into game types. Competitive games, I think everyone's familiar with that. Coordination games. And those can be assurance games or conflicting interest. And we can note them in different ways as well. One second, let me get to my area here. There can be a normal form, which is like a payoff matrix, where it's very simple matchup. There's like a finite number of combinations, and I think everyone has kind of seen this kind of thing before. And then when they're more of like a decision tree, they're more complex. There's like branching paths, and then we have to say, so in this example, A can choose either sports or comedy. This is an example of a conflicting interest game. And they have a preference, maybe to sports, and then that affects B. They're trying to coordinate with them. to arrive at the same choice. They prefer to have the same to have the same choice, but they may react to either sports or comedy. So those are more complex in terms of the math, and it's better to draw them as decision trees. In fact, maybe you have to really figure out what are the strategies in them. And John Nash said, when things are non-cooperative, which I think is similar to competition, they're defined by an absence of coalitions, which I thought was a succinct way to put that. We can move on. And then we can talk about... Yeah. Is there a problem with it? Okay. We'll put it in my lap. Sound good? Okay. Types of strategies. We can say that they're dominant when there's a best result for one. It's sort of like optimal. We can say that a strategy leads to a Nash equilibrium when there's a set of strategies where there's no incentive to switch. So there's no mutual best response to it. And then Nash's theorem says that all finite games, so again, limited number of players, have a Nash equilibrium in them. Or they should. And then we can talk about pure mixed strategies. So a pure strategy is you just choose it and stick with it the whole time, even in an iterated game. And mixed means you switch it up. And maybe that's random. Actually, I read some people that were claiming that mixed strategies don't actually exist in the wild, or they're not like quite mixed strategies. They converge to pure ones, but it seems like the opposite to me. Although we can think of like Bitcoin hodlers. Are they pursuing a pure strategy because they're just doing one thing and sticking with it? They're never selling. They're hoping that in the future it'll be more valuable. I don't know. It seems like a winning one so far. So to put it even shorter, is Nash equilibrium is just mutual best response. Think of it like that way. We don't have another choice that we can switch to. And then there are types of strategies like trigger strategy. So you pursue one, whether it's cooperate, defect, do hodl, do something else until some condition is met, right? So you wait for conditions to change or an opponent to make a move. A grim trigger is a type of trigger strategy where you cooperate until an opponent defects, and then you always defect afterwards. So this is sort of like punishing and then never forgiving. Okay, and then we can talk about a tit for tat strategy. Anyone heard of this before? Okay. Which is defined by cooperating first, and then you do whatever the opponent did. So you show good faith, and then if you were defected against, or they do something against you, you punish, but then you move on. And tit for two tats is particularly interesting because you only react to double defection, which allows for, as I understand it, some noise in the system. So in a distributed system, there could have been an error in some way. There could have been maybe they failed to make a move, which is seen as defection in some games, and this allows for some mistakes to be made before it punishes by defecting as well. Oops. Okay, so the prisoner's dilemma, just real quick to recap, the Rand Corporation introduced, is that there are two criminals or suspects that get caught. They're in jail. The payoff matrix, they have two potential choices. They can either turn the other guy in, which is like confessing, which I've represented with the hand with the pen, or they can keep their mouth shut and just have. So I've plotted this with like years in jail rather than points, but it's like they get 1 year in jail if they cooperate and don't turn each other in. If one turns the other one in, he goes free. The other guy gets 3 years in jail, and we have a symmetry that they also can do that, and they can both end up confessing and that leads to 2 years in jail each. So we can say that the dominant strategy is for each to confess, like that's what you want to do to maximize that you get to go free. You spend no years in jail and you turn your potential accomplice in. But odds are the Nash equilibrium is that both end up confessing to this, and so you end up with the worst case scenario. Does that make sense? So you can think of Nash equilibrium also as what happens when there's no enforcement. It's sort of like a low level of the decision space. So for instance, I've seen it compared to following traffic law. Like, you're not going to get a ticket for something in the absence of police, but you do it anyway out of self-preservation, or because the cost of switching your strategy is great in some way. Like, I don't know, stopping at a stoplight or driving on one side of the road except to pass, these kind of things. I guess there are also knife edge equilibria where they only exist for like specific payout numbers, and that obviously introduces more complexity. We can also talk about rock, paper, scissors, which I think everyone is familiar with. And what's interesting about this one is that it's claimed that there's no pure Nash equilibrium for rock, paper, scissors. And why is this? Well, because the payouts are symmetric. Each player has access to the same ones, and really it's that random can't be beaten in this kind of scenario. So you can either win, lose, or draw, but you're best just mixing it up. There's no point in switching this, because you can always be countered by the other one. So that's kind of interesting to me. It's like all outcomes equally good or bad. There's also a stag hunt, which is kind of like a coordination game and an insurance game, in that the stag is harder to take down. You need a partner to do it. So you have to cooperate to take down the stag, and we can see that like it's worth 3 points, whereas alone you can catch a rabbit and that's only worth 1. And you probably can't take down the stag on your own. So you need both people to pick. You need both players to pick stag, to commit to doing that. And it seems like it would be easy, but it's actually hard to do, because if you don't know anything about your opponent, and if they're pursuing their self-interest, they would leave you in the lurch. So what's more interesting is when you take those simple games and you iterate them, so you have many rounds. And this happened in the 80s. There was a researcher, I think at maybe University of Michigan, that asked for simulations in a tournament. So a bunch of game theorists could submit strategy on a floppy disk to be run in some kind of mainframe computer simulation, and do an iterated prisoner's dilemma tournament. And it averaged 200 rounds of 5 games each. So we converged to some kind of average. And it's important that it averaged 200 rounds, that we actually don't know when the last round is, because of this property called backward induction, where if I know it's the last round, it makes sense for me to defect always at that last time. And then because I defected, if we work backwards from that, because I defect in the last round, I know when it is, it makes sense for me to defect before, and defect before that, and defect before that. Like, I'm just maximizing there, and it turns out I defect each time. So to prevent that kind of from happening, or for someone pursuing that strategy, we make the rounds random. We don't know when it's really going to end. It could continue, it could not. It's a best guess. And instead of jail time in this prisoner's dilemma, they rewarded points. And then at the end of the 200 round 5 games, we add up all the points. The strategies themselves are, some of them are simple and pure strategy. They have one rule, like they cooperate but they hold grudges. They keep more complex memory of previous moves. So this is kind of like they have all the global information. or they're just random, right? And imagine, well, if you were a player playing it, not like a simple 1980s computer strategy, how do you know when someone's when you're playing against a random strategy or not? You'd have to go through many rounds to figure that out. There's actually a cool Python package where you can play with this experiment called Axelrod, named after the researcher as well. And it has all those types that they were submitted, right? So the result was that tit for tat, remember that is cooperate first and then react to, punishments like in the previous move. It turns out over many, many iterations, it outcompetes others on average. All right. When it's going up against what's called Friedman, which has grudges, it enters into a cooperation cycle because it's never punishing a defection, and Friedman never has a grudge trigger condition, and they just ride off into the sunset. Should have put the sunset Wojak there. And then Joss is a copy of tit for tat, but with 10% random defects. So sometimes they'll have this noise injected where suddenly it defects. And that one is interesting against tit for tat. Even though tit for tat outperforms against a copy with some noise, it goes into this alternating retaliation. And then if you have the bad luck of a second unprovoked defection, it gets locked into a defect cycle to the end. So we can see, I don't know, you can see analogs of that in, I don't know, in the real world as well. Even with these simple strategies, like how do we get into this, cycle of mistrust and maybe even violence. So here are some properties that they determined after the first tournament, where we didn't know that tit for tat was going to flip to the top. It turns out the strategies that ranked highly were nice in that they don't open with a defect. They practice good faith, right? They cooperate at first. And they're forgiving in that they don't keep grudges after one cycle. So they'll punish once and then they'll just, act like it's a fresh start. Because it kind of is. After the second tournament where people could react to tit for tat and, try to trip it up, it turns out it still comes up out on top. But now we learned two more properties from the second Axelrod tournament of winning strategies, that they're provocable, they punish immediately, so they're not pushovers. They won't, ignore punishment. And they're also clear in that they don't resemble a actually mixed random strategy. So, if you knew you were playing against a random strategy, well, you'd probably just try to, you only have two choices. You'd probably just try to cooperate or defect, maximize one or the other. So as long as it has those properties, which tit for tat does, or other ones do, I think tit for two tats as well. Nice, forgiving, provocable, and clear. They come out on top. It doesn't matter how many you run. You can run, an evolutionary strategy where tit for tat has descendants with some mutation, and they still generally tend to be on top. So there's some implications, which I want to draw for other things. There's a problem of credible threats, which is defined as basically, if I threaten you, you need to know that I can act on that. And the way in games that can be done is by what's called bridge burning, where an army is advancing to a battleground and it has to cross a certain bridge. Well, I always have the option of retreat, so I could be bluffing, right? Like this happens in poker too. How do I know you're being credible? You should just be lying. You always have, a way to retreat or back off. You could be creating, spoofing fake signals. Well, if I'm the advancing army and I get to the battleground across the bridge, I burn it so that there's no retreat, and you know that I'm going full on. That's the path we're taking, right? And so, luckily, in blockchain and other systems, we actually have somewhat hard, commitments that we can make credible threats, or we can make almost promises in some way. I can lock something in a smart contract, and that until some conditions are met, it can't be unlocked. So I can't, fool you about that if it's on chain. I could create, zero knowledge proofs or other, very mathematically hard guarantees of things. And so it's amazing we don't see that more often. I don't know. I'm thinking of times where tokens were sold recently that shouldn't have been, and they should have been actually like credibly locked. Yeah. And it turns out in iterated multi-stage games, we also get like a concept of reputation. So we kind of know something about the strategy we're dealing with, as I alluded to before. We can punish previous behavior, and we can guess about like what strategy that opponent is following. Like, are they like totally chaotic and random? Are they, always cooperating? They're a good actor in the system. So having like a good memory of these things, or having access to all of it, all the history, is also important. And so if we reason about blockchain and Web3, it seems to be public, as in, like I just said, we have all the information. We're in repeated games. We don't actually know, or maybe they're sub games. We don't actually know when they end. They're infinite, but not really. They're just like an unbounded number of players. There can be a lot. There can be quite a small amount, but it's definitely not finite. And they're just inherently financialized because there's value there, and everyone has arrived at that social consensus. However, it seems the strategies seem like they're public, in that they're public in the past, but they could actually be obscure, right? Like, we don't know who's doing what. We have a problem of attribution. We don't know where the funds are, or whether a bunch of different actors are actually another one, right? So reputation is kind of opt-in. So maybe it's not like we can see moves that are being made, but we don't know who we're dealing with. And like I called them sub games before. That just means they're like a subset of rounds in an iterated game. We don't know the last round, and that actually helps us. That actually prevents people from doing taking advantage of it. So like an airdrop snapshot, I would say, is sort of like a boundary, like removing this information. We don't know when the snapshot is taken, so we just act like it could be taken at any time. The same with like a launch. We're not going to tell you when it launches, so you can front run it. And again, like, because it's financialized, we assume that, well, you can assume that incentive to maximize profit is like dominant strategy for everyone. This was an interesting one, right? Okay, so does anyone remember Olympus DAO? Yeah, where does that 9 come from? Is that just like compounding? Oh, that's all the forks. Yeah. No, you could interrupt now because we're getting into the.
Meow. Whoa. 99. Yes, a little loud. Okay. 99, you auto compound, and you would use like fun DeFi stuff. So it would go from like 500 APR to 5,000 APR and 99, because you all auto compound at the same time, and rebuy and restake. And 99 also had to do with like getting into the bonding curve to like buy it lower, and then like whenever it unlocks, you stake it. So then you're like buying the bonding curve, or like the Olympus bonds that you were locked into.
That's crazy.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Back in the day when DeFi was interesting.
Well, in the simple model that they presented, just real quick, if anyone doesn't know. So, as I understand it, I mean, Olympus DAO is still around. Like, it just had a drawdown like everything else. It still has like, I don't know, 100 million.
Has a pretty solid treasury.
Yeah. So I think the point of it was that it issues a token based on its treasury, and it just buys like every asset in DeFi. And so it's trying to create like this reserve currency that's linked to DAI, stable-ish coin. But they memed this concept of 3-3, which you might even still see in people's profiles and talk about. So they were trying to say that in their system, staking, which is kind of like a commitment long term, like locking up for the long term, you get a much larger payout if everyone does it. So everyone's cooperating and playing a much longer game, like many rounds, and it's much better than just bonding which is like short term, and that's represented by the paper here. And selling is only weakly beneficial because that depresses the price of the underlying token. And then if everyone sells, it starts to trend down. So it would be better, it would be rational if everyone just staked for the long term, didn't withdraw, and then Olympus DAO would, buy up all the assets. But then you might be thinking, well, how do you exit? Like everyone is locked in this virtuous cycle. So it's an interesting meme, and it got I think it popularized those kind of payoff matrices, but the real system was ended up being more complicated. And if you're paying close attention, you'll see that because there's this weekly dominant strategy in the middle, it's not equivalent to prisoner's dilemma. It's like 3x3, and that was 3x2, right? Or no, sorry, 2x2. Yeah. So it's not actually equivalent, and it turns out people take risk into account, and time preference and all these things, and maybe they end up only bonding for short term, so they always have the option to exit. But I'm actually not sure what was it just generally like a bank run, like a cascade, or something else that caused it to plummet. It's hard to say. Or if anyone knows, let me know.
So why it went down bad?
Yeah.
A lot of people were looped, and you would get liquidated. So you would loop your 3-3, so then it would force sell, and then because you were locked, it would like sell your locked tokens. So it was like cascading liquidations, and then like future liquidations as soon as they unlocked. So it became like -3 because it was like forced selling on top of like future forced selling. And then like
Damn.
a bunch of whales were playing this game where they were just like trying to liquidate each other. The fun one was more on Wonderland, because that back in the day there was a Olympus fork on every chain imaginable. I remember aping into one on like Polkadot, Moonbeam shit. Like it would get very deep in the weeds, but Wonderland, you could like put it into Mim, Abracadabra, and then loop it, and then like you could do like 99 loops and like just go very, very ape. But some whale realized that you could find the liquidation levels, so they just like mass sold, and then they were trying to buy it cheap, but then they like overplayed their hand and just liquidated everyone, and then like broke the protocol.
Amazing.
Yeah, Frog Nation was like fun times.
Yeah. So we see like, okay, this is the point, and I think this is what I'm trying to get to, is that this is a great meme, and it seems to make such sense, but the real interaction or the real game that's being played is much more complicated, and there's all sorts of strange incentives. Like you would never expect, whales or large players to deliberately try to, fight each other in that, or do something that's like, cause them to lose money. And yet that's what happened in the real system. So maybe it's, not only is it more complex and can't be modeled with, a simple payoff matrix, but turns out there are just many more types of agents in the world that have murky incentives and strategies. So as I said before, we can think of these as sub games. Like there's a Web3 end game where we're all going to make it. We decentralize everything. We achieve mass adoption. And then there's all these little ones along the way where we're trying to participate in network. We're trying to grow them. We're trying to profit from it. So, first figure out like, what kind of game you're playing within the larger, financial game or technological game. I also like to think about, and people talk about this a lot, other worlds like MMOs. Anyone played, these kind of games? We were talking about RuneScape before, which I never played. But people that played those tend to have learned a lot of these lessons like intuitively, even if they didn't study it. So we can think about like adversarial or cooperative modes. They all seem to have that, and people even now still talk about PvP, player versus player, or PvE, player versus environment. You can think of like Stag Hunt, that game where you need more than one player to like take down like a larger beast. This is like a dungeon crawl, where you need a lot of people to get together, and we can have a greater payoff. Or you can just which is a type of coordination subgame, or we can just ignore everyone and farm gold or resources, which was very fruitful for people in these kind of games. I don't know. Some people enjoyed that, and it's always susceptible to. Oh, typo. That's how you know I didn't use the LLM here. Um, what was I saying? Yeah, it's always susceptible to automation or Sybil attack. Like I can spin up many different instances of the game, and I can run some kind of automated strategy to maximize payoff of something. So we have to assume that in these kind of things that someone is able to run a bunch of bots, or in absence of some kind of proof of their identity or attribution, they can coordinate swarms of these things. So you have to design with that in mind in a blockchain, whereas you didn't in like, I don't know, poker or some other more bounded kind of game. They're open in that way and infinite, like I said. So what I find very useful here are what are called agent-based models. And basically that just means you define the game. This is well, we can use them when we're building a mechanism, or when we're analyzing one that already exists, but not something in the real world. Again, it's just a model, maybe more like a game or a blockchain world subgame. We just set starting parameters, the rules of the game, and any ending conditions, and then we define types of agents and their strategies, and then put them in a pool. And because you're kind of you want to guess with some randomness about like, all right, what is the actual like prevalence of these type of agents in a system. You do random sampling from this distribution, and then you got like a loadout, like a population. And then you run that simulation, like they all play the game according to their strategy, and plot the results. And you have different reports and types of data. So there's a chart here that says average number of a graph, like consecutive rounds without a transaction for different population sizes. And you can kind of reason about what type of game you've set up and how it plays out over, I don't know, 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, and quite long, or with different, populations. You get like a step table for each agent, and you can graph the macro parameters. So maybe in blockchain or like dApps, we're interested in like solvency of a protocol, or the Gini coefficient, which is like wealth distribution. Like how does it end up? I don't know. I didn't see anyone do this for Ethereum or any of the others, like projecting how that distribution would happen over time. But anyway, you can do this in another Python framework called Mesa, which I learned on. So what types of agents can we think about? Well, you can come up with an agent taxonomy from archetypes we know from Web3. As Julian was saying before, there are different whales, which we define as like someone with a lot of funds, right? Maybe they're an institution, maybe they're just a wealthy individual. Shrimps, which are the opposite of whales, they're just small timers. Rubes, which is my term of art for someone that doesn't know what they're doing. They're unskilled. Maybe white and black hat hackers, right? People trying to exploit a protocol for various reasons, or rescue funds. Even MEV bots that are just trying to, pursue a pure strategy of profiting from transactions. So they'll go wherever that goes, but they maybe they have a tolerance for like very small wins, right? That add up over time. So if you put them into categories, there's like skilled players, so that we can say that they're rational via a mixed strategy. They're willing to change up the strategy based on the conditions, right? Um, and they actually maximize profit in the long run. That's why they're skilled. Unskilled, maybe they just do one thing forever, even when it doesn't make sense, or they're just low information, like they're dumb. They don't know why. They lose money all the time. I always inject in chaotic agents, so they're either like irrational or they seem irrational because you don't know what their off-chain strategy they're pursuing. So, for instance, in that example, the whales that were trying to liquidate each other, or someone that's trying to do something other than gain financially, or they're just random. They're actually purely chaotic, and I don't know. Maybe those exist, maybe they don't. It would definitely cost money to run like a random bot, but it's worth injecting noise again into that system to see how things respond.
Be like address phishing.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's necessarily chaotic. It's kind of strategized, but like when you receive or when you always receive from some address and somebody sends you something from an address that's similar, they're like phishing for you to send back to them.
Yeah.
Kind of irrational, but I guess there is some strategy to it.
Yeah, I mean, we can make a good guess at that. An example, yeah, we can guess what their strategy, which is like we're phishing. But sometimes you don't even know why a transaction was made. Like there's no message, usually or something like that. I'm thinking of the guy that was putting cryptic messages in some transactions and then burning like expensive NFTs, burning Ethereum, like, and you would think they're like, all right, at some point he's gonna, he's getting all this attention. Why didn't he, drop something, promote his project or whatever? But no, it wasn't about attention. He was doing it for some unknown reason. So it seems irrational to us, but maybe there's an inner logic. And like I said before, that those tend to converge when they seem mixed. And the one we might know from in the corner, the gnomes from RuneScape, griefers, which apparently were very popular in this game, and taught everyone about being scammed. They might have a meta utility, right? And my example for this, besides like, okay, you can think of where there's like a bug bounty for some protocol, and I know that I can break the protocol, I can brick the contract, and everyone loses money. Why would I do that? Well, I would not do it and report it if there was a sufficient bug bounty that paid me for reporting that, right? So I would be a griefer, but I was incentivized to be white hat. But it's more complicated than that because you could also have options, right? So I can, if there's sufficient liquidity and other conditions, I can take an option that I profit when the price of something else goes down. Its reputation is tarnished. So I could say, I don't know, short Solana and then cause it to go down, and I would still profit from that. So what I'm saying here is that in your agent taxonomy, if you're doing an agent-based model, always add griefers in, which are chaotic agents that they don't seem to have some kind of profitable strategy or utility. They have meta utility. And then I tried to graph this actually because I was interested in it. So these are this is a graph of daily block count for Solana over time from October 2022. And I'm not just picking on Solana, but it did go down a few times, and it is like a very important network with a lot of liquidity and value. And I tried to see if there was actually like a price change when Solana went down, right? Because people can still trade it even though the network is down or it can't reach finality, as they would say, it has a loss of finality. They could trade it on the centralized exchange. They could have an option on another network like a DEX. So, and I zoom in on one in February of last year, and we see, I think I should have done like the delta in an average price, but that's like a harder query to do. But yeah, it doesn't seem like it totally affected. So you can see those drops in the orange where block production was much lower than some kind of moving average. And yeah, it maybe affected price temporarily, and then it recovered, right? Depending on how long that outage was. But that's kind of just an example of how griefers could profit even if they're destroying things or destroying other people's value. And I believe that is the end of the talk, or that's all I came up with. So the question I would put is, can you think of other, maybe other types of agents for the taxonomy or situations where, things weren't as simple as, game theory would predict, or other examples from
Staking
games
Celestia.
or blockchain. Oh, staking again, yeah.
Celestia, though. It was all game theory. It never paid off.
Well, how do you know we're at the end of the round?
I mean, has any Celestia airdropped been worth anything?
I think it has.
Has it paid off being locked for a year as it goes down only?
No,
Okay.
no, it certainly hasn't. No, so it's like, yeah, staking, like long-term staking or locking something, like making that commitment. No, has not paid off. But I think there were related ones where if you staked in the previous round and locked, you got the next stage there drop. So that's a little bit smarter than that. And yeah, I think that I guess my point is that we say game theory as like a shorthand, but we actually don't have a really good theory for the type of sub game we're playing. We have these like tropes, but they end up being more complicated, and people aren't thinking very deeply about mechanism design because, again, not everything is, pursuing its rational, profit maximizing. Not everything is reducible to a simple, payoff. Otherwise, we'd be cooperating all the time in those types of situations, and we obviously don't have that world. Although we do have some cooperation, like, I don't know, block production, running validators. That's solved because they're like hard guarantees. Go.
What about perpetual futures and funding rates?
I think you know more about that than I do.
Yeah, but in the sense of like game theory, like the whole game is around keeping price steady, and everyone can be selfish while still making money in such a way. Like market makers are incentivized to keep prices close to what is commonly known as fair price,
Yeah.
which is better for users. And there's incentives kind of alignment along that.
Well,
like,
don't they get paid like they have like a strike price and like they have a range that is set? I guess the more interesting is like when that like bribe or incentive, goes away, you're saying that it still like happens.
well, it doesn't because it's perpetual. But in that sense, like you have a constant bribe that is paid by one side of the position. And it's like constantly aligning people on like what is fair value.
Yeah.
Well, anyone can move price back to spot price because you're getting paid funding rates. Like it's all the game theory on like, and you
So-
can hedge. So
but-
like, if the price is going above the spot price, anyone can just short and buy a spot, and
Yeah.
then just earn like free delta, or like
So
free
Yeah.
APR. on
is this
that. I don't know.
something
Owen
that's
seems
more
like
like
he wants to say something.
is it like emergent where, no one set the parameters of this kind of like maybe sub game or market? It just emerged out of,
Yeah.
incentives.
Yeah. So if you go, do you want to go back to the different categories? Skilled and
Where
whatever.
there?
Yeah. So like, I feel like a lot of these or people farming that would be like a skilled, like in the skilled area, right? Because they see these opportunities, there's inefficiencies, so you can kind of take advantage of those with a skilled strat. And then there's just the unskilled people that want to long ETH because they think it's going to go up. So
Yeah.
I think like that's how I would fit it.
It like averages out.
Yeah, and like there's those opportunity. There's either the risk of the unskilled player that maybe has a strategy that ends up working, but they essentially take that risk. And then there's the skilled, which will take the safer bet, but will always get
Sure.
paid. Or yeah,
Yeah, it is interesting in it's like two-sided market. There always has to be someone on the other end that disagrees, or maybe they have, other hidden information, or they think they do.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Speed.
Yeah. Indeed.
It's also like with MEV in general, is it's just a skilled versus the unskilled, and
Mm-hmm.
I think the skilled always wins, or wins in the long run, anyways.
Yeah, true.
I guess among these archetypes, they can also like switch between like say like a skilled one to a chaotic one, right? Outside of some other events that's not on chain happening, like yeah, I guess they can become each other.
Yeah. I think they have that option via, with a mixed strategy, or it seems like that. But it also allows for, like, I don't know, mistakes or something like that, or they get over leveraged and they have to, unwind in some way.
I think too, in like, the chaotic is kind of hard because I don't think it pops up too often. And like you were saying that chaotic is maybe like, or is griefers like a subset of chaotic?
Yeah, I guess I'm putting it under a subset because it seems like it's irrational, but it actually has some meta utility that's hard to
Yeah.
know.
And I think that is
And
kind of like,
I'm not saying that these are the ones that, like, these are the only ones that exist, but
yeah,
in the agent-based modeling, you need some of those
yeah,
because you're simulating, or you're making sure that that your protocol or your game is robust against noise
Yeah.
or other strange things in a dark forest where there can be other
And
not
I-
everything is on chain. So this
Yeah.
is a way of, like, making sure that it has that robustness, I
well,
guess.
yeah, and I think that's where, like, on chain, I feel like chaotic is kind of, or griefers at least are in that skilled category, because like, yes, it is random, and a lot of like MEV as well is like you have no idea what their strategy is. You can
Yeah.
see what they're doing, you can see that they're making money, but like you can't know what their signals are or what logic they have behind it. So I feel like a lot of those skilled are actually also griefers, or in the meta utility category. Yeah.
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 Well, you could. I don't know. You have.
Yeah, do you have
on
anything
mic?
to
Yeah.
add?
You want to share with the class?
You guys want to add something?
Yeah. Oh, another thing is that I wanted to talk about, but it didn't fit in here, was I thought the Layer 0 airdrop, like, Sybil report program was so cool. I don't know if anyone remembers that. It wasn't that long ago. They were trying to do Sybil detection. Now, everyone knows what Sybil attack is, right? Do I need to explain that? You don't know? Oh, man. Okay. It's basically like a group, or like an individual or group coordinating like many accounts. So via automation or something. And it gets quite, sophisticated. So they're like trying to appear like a bunch of unique users, and then they maximize like an airdrop reward. And they, like, do crazy things, like they fund them from different sources and make sure their patterns are all different. They, like, season them so they look like, they have other, hobbies, that they appear real. I think they even might, use gather a bunch of, like, real IDs or even fake ones, and create accounts that way. But, like, there's many different strategies to it. So Layer 0 is doing retrospective airdrop based on, usage of their protocol, and they want to reward real users, and they want to strike out these Sybil farms that they know exist, right? And they know that, like, all right, they're gonna, run their strategies to detect them, but it's very cat and mouse. They're probably not going to get a good rate. There's always going to be some that slip through. So what they did was they said, okay, we're going to do that. We're going to try to find the Sybilers, but if you report, if you come clean and self-report that you're a Sybiler, so if we strike you without self-report, you get nothing. But if you self-report, you get something. You get 15% or something, of what you would get. And you get even more if you report a very big cluster of other Sybil farmers. So it was sort of like banking on the idea that maybe there's some operator within this crew that is not paid well, right? This is sort of like bribing. this is why you want to pay politicians like a bunch of money. It seems wrong, but like actually it prevents them from being bribed in small ways. So like you want to pay your employees well, even if you're, you know, a Sybil farm or other, you know, criminal enterprise. But it turns out like those people were susceptible to defection. They would be like, oh, I'll report my whole team and then take the money and run, right?
Snitches get stitches.
Well, it turns out there was, you know, there was some base rate. I don't have the figure in front of me, but there was some rate. So they set up this other, you know, I don't know, this other game about reporting Sybil, you know, farms and or clusters, if you like.
They
And
also
then-
had the self-report.
Yeah, I talked about the self-report. Yeah, there was the self-report, and then there was also, you know, snitching on like a larger thing. So there were different payoffs, right? You could be like, all right, I'm part of a Sybil group, but also these are our competitors, and these are all their addresses. Now, what actually happened is they had a form to collect all this because it's like a huge amount to process. And I think CEO Brian was saying that there was a problem at first is that all of the actual Sybil farms, they spammed the form with fake data, right, for report to make it actually like very costly to go through and find any, you know, any real signal there. So they had to like deal with that, you know, deal with like very weird escalation. So like you think that you've designed like a nice, neat little game where like, we've made a better, you know, payoff for you. You just had to take this action. And it turns out there's way more moves than you think. And it is more like this branching type of notation, which ends up being like Bayesian, like probabilistic. Like there's different probabilities that we would go down another path. So I should have put more of those trees in there, but they're much more complex, and the math is, you know, a bit can be over the head. So I thought that was an interesting, also Web3 game theoretic, like, you know, episode playing out.
So how do they prove that someone is colluding with another person on their drop?
How do you mean?
I mean,
Like in the
let's say
in the report?
you're reporting someone, and so what's the evidence? What do you say?
I
Do you,
think
for example, like look for the same source of money that go
Yeah.
through both of the addresses?
that's one way. I think that they were cross-checking it. Like they have something, like imagine they have like techniques, right, that they add together and they get this really large pool, but there's some like level, there's some error rate to it, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a ton of false positives. And then they would have the self-report and the snitching form, let's call it. And then they'd be like, all right, are you in our pool already? Like, were you already flagged, but we weren't sure? Now we're a little more sure. I think that's how it works.
I'm not sure if they used it, but also a couple other protocols have done that and used like Arkham intelligence. So
Yeah.
you can have like this dashboard that essentially shows you a probability of how they're connected. You don't necessarily want to do that for each address. But
No, it's very hard to do.
You can probably even put it into ZK, and so the actual protocol operator do not need to reevaluate the thing.
yeah, but it's not necessarily hard requirements. Like it's pretty loose for figuring out. Like if you plug it into a dashboard and you see, oh, like this looks like it's connected to this, but it's kind of hard to get hard evidence.
I mean, anyways, it's hard to get a hard evidence for like the whole story.
Yeah.
The use case is not clear.
No, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that there's further, you know, innovations that can happen, and now I'm remembering that Layer Zero also said that they were making they're making this data set like open source, like the things that they learned, the techniques that they have gained from it, that others can use it. Not only can they say like, all right, well, these are like large Sybil farm addresses, like strike, you know, we can say with some certainty, strike those off, but also this is how you might, you know, start with the groundwork to design an even better one.
And so now these Sybil accounts can
Yeah,
fix their strategies.
It's
too.
a kind of but that's the other end of it. So maybe we have some symmetry there. It's like it's
yeah.
There's
yeah.
To that extent too, if it's harder to do it, it still deters people. So if you make it so that, oh, like here's our strategy for finding these Sybil attackers, and then somebody goes through it and they're like, oh, okay, like how do I fix my Sybil strategies then? If
Yeah.
if the barrier to fix it is too difficult as well, then kind of still does the job of deterring people.
There's also game theory of making they're actually doing well when like you identify them. Because like as soon as they know that they're wrong, they update the strategies. But if they think they're doing something correctly, they don't update. So there's game theory in how you choose to reward sibblers as well. So because you can identify them and just keep them within like a
Please,
point.
please don't tell me my points aren't my
No,
actual
no,
points.
it's just talking about how layer 0.
So maybe you have a setup where like, 'cause yeah, it seems like maybe you'd want something where in the first round of reward you get a little bit, but we tell you how much unlock later. Like I've seen this, even someone that we know, has rewards into the future that are like quite large, but can't access them at the moment. Like you just get a little bit at first, and then it unlocks along some vesting curve. Like imagine like we give you that, and you think that you're in the clear, and you continue, but actually no, you get struck.
I
in
mean,
the second round.
Blast gave out Blast Gold and then Blast Points, and then when you went to claim, you had nothing.
Yeah, that's funny.
Also, kind of like the OP thing where if you claimed it, then you don't get the second one, and that was kind of hidden.
Oh, what was that? I don't.
So with optimism, like the round one, if you just sold your tokens, then you were less likely to get the second round.
Yeah. Also, Sanctum had a thing where if you instantly went to claim your tokens, they became liquid, but then you would actually get less. But if you just left it there and
Mhm.
just waited for like time to pass and then claimed later because there was no deadline, like the later you claimed, the more you actually get. But they don't like clearly advertise, so everyone can just go and claim. And then once after you claim, they're like, "Oh, you missed out." Haha.
Wow. Yeah, it seems like maybe that's where a lot of this is happening in the I don't know, maybe it's like user farming and like trying to get, adoption, sticky, active users, is that this is where, we see this incentive and mechanism design innovation, but
I mean, the problem with incentive designs that are extremely transparent is that you have institutions that will farm the shit out of it,
yeah,
and then the actual user tends to get the short end of the stick.
that was the same in MMOs with gold and resource farming. Like there were entire cartels that form to corner the market on something that everyone needs, like to craft armor or whatever. It was like over and over this kept happening. But it's interesting to think about how do you discourage such things when it could be automated or it could be scaled up like that. And maybe it's some harder mechanism for reputation or identity or something like that.
Like KYC?
No, preserving privacy in some way, but like proof of humanity is one. There's a few of these.
Yeah, like using some sort of like Gitcoin passport type thing.
Yeah.
You need a score or some certain score on there.
Anyway, Owen, you had one more thing? Yeah, they could.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. It was just making me think of like EVE Online too. Just
Oh yeah, that's a major one.
it's so big. Too many variables. Yeah. I think like they switch up the mechanism sometimes. But
Yeah, they definitely
Yeah.
tweak things. They have like in-house economists and
yeah.
no, it's funny because it's so like closely designed and probably produces a ton of data, and they have like even like longitudinal data over many years, so it's like fairly accurate within that age, that epoch, but it still is like wildly volatile and has all sorts of weird problems that again you see in other economies too, so it's very hard to do. It's like it's not ever stable. It doesn't have like a lot of equilibria.
All right. Anything else? Last comments, questions, concerns? All right. Beautiful. Round of applause.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Yoni. Yeah, if you haven't already claimed your PO app, please do. There's a little black poster. Put your phone up against it. Make sure your NFC is on if you've got an Android. Claim your PO app. And if you don't mind, help pull up your chairs. And we'll see you all next Thursday. Thanks for coming.
People with
Ciao.
POAPs got invited to a yacht party, I heard.
What?
POAP holders.
Oh yeah, pull up. Yes, that's right.